My parents refused to pay $98,000 to save my son's life, but spent $350,000 on my brother's engagement. So I built an empire with my in-laws and let my family watch it all fall apart. My name is Mallory. I'm the eldest of 3 children and the only daughter in a family that always made it clear where their true affection lay. From a young age, it was obvious that my brothers, especially Kyle, were the crown jewels of my parents' lives. I was the responsible one, the overachiever, the quiet daughter who scored straight A's and never talked back. But somehow, that was never enough. Even when I graduated with honors in biomedical engineering and married James, a man from a humble but loving family, my parents treated me like a footnote. When Levi was born, our lives felt complete. He was our miracle, a bright, curious, joyful child with an infectious laugh. For 4 years, everything was perfect. But then came the diagnosis. Levi had a rare heart condition that needed immediate surgery. The total cost was $98,000 after insurance. We did everything. Emptied savings, maxed out credit cards, considered selling our 2-bedroom condo. Still, we fell short. Desperate, we turned to my parents. Sitting across from them, my voice trembled as I explained the situation. My mother wrinkled her nose and called it a gamble. My father coldly said, "You shouldn't have had kids if you couldn't afford them." They had the money. They just bought a vacation home in Palm Springs and owned a chain of jewelry stores, but they refused to help. 2 weeks later, I saw the photos on Facebook, a $350,000 engagement party for Kyle. A luxury vineyard, fireworks, a jazz band, an ice sculpture. While my son lay in a hospital bed, my parents celebrated Kyle's engagement to a woman who referred to me as what's her name. I was numb, but my in-laws? They took action. Quietly, they sold their home, moved into a small apartment, and gave us everything. No conditions. They simply said, "We've had our life. Let him have his." That money saved Levi. It paid for his surgery and gave him a chance to live. Even now, the thought of their sacrifice brings me to tears. My parents, meanwhile, continued as if nothing had happened. They sent wedding invites, texted about dresses. It was never about the money. It was about values, about choosing glitter over blood. I poured everything into Levi and James. I quit my job and started a medical tech company based on my college thesis. The first months were brutal. I'd work after putting Levi to bed, pitching to investors in cafes, and living on caffeine. But the pain fueled me. I created a heart monitor prototype that caught the attention of a children's hospital. We partnered, it went viral in the medical world, and investors followed. Soon, we moved to a bigger home with a garden where Levi could run. My in-laws lived comfortably in a guest house on our property. I made sure they never wanted for anything. But my parents? They didn't notice until 5 years later. By then, my startup had been acquired for tens of millions. I was on Forbes, giving TED Talks, traveling the world to speak. Then the texts came. My mom asking me to pay for her Range Rover lease. My dad asking for investments in Kyle's new venture. Their jewelry empire had crashed, Kyle's business failed, the vacation house sold in bankruptcy court. One day, they showed up at my office. My receptionist was shaken. I walked into the lobby and saw them. I said calmly, "You need to leave. This place was built by people who believed in me. You are not welcome here." They were stunned. My mom said, "We're your family." My dad claimed, "You wouldn't be here without our values." I laughed. What values? Abandoning your grandchild? Choosing glitter over blood? They left, furious. Threatened to sue me for defamation after a vague interview I gave about Levi's recovery. They never did. But that was just the beginning. 4 months later, I started getting emails. One from my mom's old account. Emergency. Another voice memo. My dad coughing. A shaky message begging me to call. I didn't. I had been quietly watching their collapse. I still had access to the old company emails, the ones they had CC'd me on when I was a college intern. I forwarded them to the IRS and State Labor Board. Turns out they were hiding income, laundering money, and denying overtime pay. Former employees came forward, including a woman who was denied leave after a miscarriage. Kyle tried to sell off assets, but his wife left him. She took the Teslas and the dog. He ended up in Florida, dodging creditors. My parents' assets were frozen. Stores shut down. The vacation home seized. Then they filed bankruptcy and had the audacity to list me as a creditor. Claimed I benefited from their investments.
Lies.
I showed up to the hearing. Didn't speak. Just looked them in the eyes. My mother glared with resentment, like I had caused this by surviving. That evening, I sat alone on our patio, watching the sunset. Levi was inside, helping James bake brownies. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, unshackled from their approval, no longer tied to the need to be enough. 2 years later, James and I launched the Levi Foundation. It funded pediatric heart surgeries for families without insurance. We raised over $10 million. At the launch gala, my in-laws sat in the front row. James's mom cried through my speech. Levi hugged me and told the crowd, "That's my mom. She saves kids." That moment was my reward. Later, a journalist approached me, wanted to write about resilience and family betrayal. She promised anonymity for Levi and my in-laws. I shared everything. The article went viral. A week later, a letter came. Shaky handwriting. No return address. My mother. She begged me to retract the story. Said people were whispering. That they were ashamed. But I didn't feel guilt. Not anymore. Because they had written their own ending. I had simply stopped pretending it was a fairy tale. A year later, the Levi Foundation bought a building in the neighborhood where my parents' jewelry store once stood. We turned it into a free children's cardiac center. Walk-ins welcome. No child turned away. I named it after my in-laws. On opening day, the crowd was huge. As I cut the ribbon with James and Levi, I saw her. My mother. In cheap sunglasses, holding a grocery bag, watching from afar. She didn't approach, but tears rolled down her cheeks. I didn't wave. I didn't acknowledge her, but I felt something shift inside me. That was my closure, not their fall, but the life I built after, the son I saved, the love I chose. My parents spent years chasing diamonds, but in the end, they were left with dust. I chose heart, and it gave me everything. Months passed after the opening of the Children's Cardiac Center, and life settled into a rhythm that felt like healing in motion. Levi was thriving, running through the garden with his sneakers always covered in mud, bringing home drawings from school, and leaving sticky notes around the house that read, "I love you, Mom." Every time I looked at him, I knew that everything we had sacrificed, fought for, and survived was worth it. James was my rock, always steady, always kind. And my in-laws had found a new joy in their grandson's laughter, in the quiet mornings on our porch, in the peace that came from knowing their decision had meant life for him. They lived without regret. And in turn, I found a way to let go of mine. But the past doesn't always stay quiet. Even after that moment in the crowd where I saw my mother's face half hidden behind those cheap sunglasses, I knew there was still a part of her that hoped to be seen, to be forgiven. But I had no more room for those illusions. I had moved beyond the life where I waited for apologies that would never come. I no longer needed their acknowledgement, nor their remorse. They had already said everything through their silence when Levi was dying, through their absence at the most crucial crossroads of my life. There was nothing left for them to say that could change that truth. One afternoon, almost a year later, a letter arrived. This time, it wasn't handwritten, but typed, cold and legal. It was a notice that my parents were attempting to file for early release of what little assets had been left frozen by the court. Somehow, they believed that if I didn't object, they could use my lack of resistance as proof that the bridge between us could be rebuilt.
I didn't respond.
I didn't need to. The court saw through their intentions. Their petition was denied. And with that, it seemed the last flicker of their entitlement was extinguished. Still, I found myself thinking about them sometimes. Not with longing, not with anger, but with a kind of distant curiosity, the way you might think of an abandoned house from your childhood street. Something you used to know. A shell that once held meaning but now only held dust and echoes. I would remember my mother's perfume, the sound of my father's shoes against the tile, the laughs that had felt hollow even then. I wondered if they looked at themselves in the mirror and saw who they had become, or if they still told themselves that I had been the one who walked away. Levi grew taller, stronger. He took an interest in the medical field of all things. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, scribbling into a notebook, and asked, "Mom, do you think I could build a machine that helps other kids like me one day?" I smiled, tears rising uninvited to my eyes, and reached across to take his hand. "You already are," I whispered.
And it was true.
His survival had become the catalyst for so much good. Every heart monitor sent out from our labs, every surgery funded by our foundation, every family who walked into that free clinic, it all traced back to one moment. One child. One decision made in love. And that was the difference. My parents had built their life on image, on appearances, on being seen in the right circles, wearing the right things, saying the right words, even when their hearts were empty. But my life had been rebuilt on something deeper, on the kind of love that doesn't ask for credit, the kind that doesn't run when things get hard.
My in-laws had taught me that.
James had proved it daily. And Levi, in his innocence, had shown me what it means to fight with everything you have simply because someone matters that much. I no longer looked for justice. I no longer needed revenge. I had been given something far greater, a life rooted in truth. A family that chose me. A son who lived because someone believed he deserved to. The past may have shaped me, but it no longer owned me. I had taken everything that tried to break me and built something beautiful instead. And that, in the end, was my victory. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more stories that prove love doesn't just heal, it transforms.